Uh, Chair Cormack, it is ready. You're ready to set the meeting, start the meeting.
Great, thank you so much, Ms. Lunt. Good evening, it's Tuesday, August 11th. This is a regular meeting of the Policy and Services Committee, and would the clerk please call the roll?
Chair Cormack,
Here.
Councilmember Filseth,
Here.
Councilmember Koo,
Here.
3 present.
Thank you so much. And now we turn to oral communication, where members of the public may speak to any item not on the agenda that is within the purview of the Policy and Services Committee. And I'll ask the clerk to give the public a moment to share their thoughts.
Thank you. There are a few attendees, but so far no one raising their hand. So if anyone attending this meeting would like to speak during oral communications, please raise your hand at this time in the Zoom meeting or press *9 on your phone if you're listening or attending by phone. So give it a second or two. And so far there's no one with their hand raised.
All right, then we'll go ahead and close oral communications and move on to our action item today, which is to discuss the process for the 2020 National Community Survey. And I believe the Assistant City Manager, Ms. Eisenhenny, is going to share a presentation.
Kim, are you going to run the slideshow or am I?
If you'd like to, that'd be good.
Okay, hang on for a second. Let me find share screen. Share. I'm in the screen share mode. Can you all see that? Okay.
That looks promising. We're also seeing the top of your screen, but that's okay.
Okay. Yeah. Let's go ahead and do this. There's nothing crazy up there, so and we have one slide.
Okay, that'll make it easy.
It makes it very easy. So thank you to Policy and Services for considering and providing some conversation about the annual city survey. As I was preparing for tonight's presentation, I learned that, well, I did not find actually any previous presentations to either Policy and Services or City Council that was just about the survey itself. That doesn't mean those weren't there, but could not find any reports. And so I really didn't have any history to go on in terms of what we might consider from the past, other than the reports and the surveys that have been done by the auditor's office, and to kind of track what that process has been like. So in previous years, the auditor has worked with the City Council to solicit potential questions that they would like asked as part of a standardized standardized survey that is administered by a third party to gain insight on the level of satisfaction with different city services, different uses of or different initiatives, as well as what people may suggest in open-ended questions as well. In the past year or so, though, that task of conducting a survey has come to the city manager's office. And as we were preparing for this, we had conversations and considered that Policy and Services might be a great place to gain insight on whether the frequency was appropriate, the format, and just to confirm how we use the survey as a tool. In the past, The ELT, the department heads, have also had opportunities to submit questions that they might be interested in including, though that number of questions is not unlimited. There are costs associated with the degree of customization of the survey, how many surveys we hand out or distribute, and how the reporting is done by the National Community Survey, as it's now known. It was originally National Citizen Survey, and the National Research Center, which has been purchased by Polco, is now calling it the National Community Survey. So things to consider as part of this are the frequency of the survey. We have, in the most recent past, conducted this survey annually. The survey is very lengthy and takes about 20 minutes to complete. It's possible we could do shorter surveys. We could also not customize to the extent that we have currently been doing. For example, the questions on the survey that are about utilities are customized questions. Other communities don't ask those same questions. We have other options. We can do shorter targeted questions or surveys. We also use OpenGov as a separate platform and have cultivated a group of respondents and people engaged with that. That's a completely separate platform, and we use that for other activities as well as the council priority setting as we get towards the annual retreat for council. Other things to consider are the format. We have traditionally done a completely by mail paper survey. The company sends a postcard to the selected addresses. It is a statistically sorted and handled survey, so it's done randomly. It's not an opt-in. You are selected. You're mailed a paper survey, and you're asked to return it by mail. Then the company enters that data by hand and weights the answer based on the demographic responses and in more recent years by the geographic location of the respondents. So again, we could just do a basic survey, and we now have options where it can be completely online. We can have an opt-in where it's not statistically validated, but it would allow anybody to respond if they wanted to. Or we could offer a hybrid where addresses again are selected randomly, but half receive paper and about half would receive a link to do an online survey. And again, the function, if you wanted to discuss that, how do you use the survey? In the past, we've used it for informing the priority setting. Some of the information is included as part of the annual budget document and for budget planning. And then for the basic survey, if we were to use that option, we would be able to benchmark against other cities, other jurisdictions who are also using the survey. Many of the participants in the survey conduct this kind of outreach and survey effort every other year, every 3 years, every 4 years. Not many do an annual survey, mostly because those that are using it for budgetary reasons even if they have an idea that comes from a survey, to develop the initiative, create a budget line for that item, and then actually get a project underway generally takes a couple of years. So the ability to see an improved outcome based on the input received on the survey generally takes 2 to 3 years or perhaps longer. So tonight, we're asking just to have a conversation, and I'm available to answer some questions and to see if you can provide us with any thoughts or direction that you might want this survey to go. And we're just looking for feedback based on that information. So I'll turn it back to you, Chair Cormack.
Thank you, Ms. Susan Henney. Thanks for setting the stage for us. At this point, let's turn to the public and see if anyone would like to comment on this action item, and I'll ask the clerk to assist anyone who's interested in doing that.
Thank you, Chair Cormack. This is Kim. I'm clerking the meeting here. It looks like we have one raised hand so far, Cheryl Spencer. Although if anyone else would like to speak at this time, please raise your hand in the Zoom app or press *9 on your phone if you're participating by phone. So at this time, we have Cheryl Spencer. I'm going to allow you to speak. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Cheryl. Okay.
Yes, good evening, councillors. So I've been taking a look at the report from 2018. It's a fascinating set of questions. For example, they ask how overall feeling of safety. It's question 2, health and wellness opportunities in Palo Alto, ease of getting to places you visit, affordability of housing. And I noticed the demographics, they do actually ask the sex of the person answering the survey. So I would like to suggest that there's no analysis done, though, by sex. I think it would be very interesting to see if there's any difference in how the questions are answered based on the sex of the person answering it. Because this would help see if we could tease out whether there is any difference in how women and men feel about some of these important things, and whether that might be on account of some discrimination that the city is doing unknowingly, right? So the ease of getting to places, for example, we were ranked 202 out of 258 similar jurisdictions. That's very low. The safety was pretty good. We were ranked bottom in affordable housing. 296 out of 296 similar jurisdictions said terrible affordable housing. Are any of these things shown? Can we see if the women and men answering have different percentages on this? I think it would be very interesting. So I'm suggesting for your future reports, a future analysis, whenever you do that, that you ask the maker of the survey to add some answers, some analysis by the sex of the respondent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. And at this time, I do not see any other hands raised. So I think no more public comment.
Thank you to the clerk. And now I'll just make just sort of a stage setting comment before I turn to my colleagues for their thoughts. I went and dug out the last time we got this, hold it up, I don't know if you can see, our survey. And I did count the number of questions. It's 141 questions, not including the custom questions and the demographics. So as we talk tonight, I'd love for us to think about the function, like why do we do this? And then talk about the frequency and the format so we can choose that. And I will look to see which of my colleagues would like to raise their blue hand and go first. Councilmember Philseth.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks, Monique. Can you hear me? Okay. So I like the national, I guess it's community survey. I like the National Community Survey quite a bit. And I've been on council for, I guess, what, 5 years or 6 years now. And I've been sort of, watching it carefully, all these years. And I regret that we skipped it last year, but I understand. And my impression, I think, is that Harriet actually did a lot of the work on it herself. And so our institutional knowledge on this has slipped a bit with her departure. Nevertheless, the things that I like about it the most, that I hope that we can find a way to preserve as we go forward, are, I think it's the closest thing we have to a statistically flat sample. It typically gets, 600 or 700 to 1,000 or sometimes more responses, so it's a lot. It's also mailed, so it's not skewed by people that use Facebook or people that are online or people that have landlines on their phone and so forth. Whether that continues to be the flattest way to do a survey like this, we should probably look at some point. But I'm laboring under the impression that the all mail thing minimizes the skews. I'd like to know that for sure. What we have done in the past is to have mostly standard questions, although many of them are relevant to Palo Alto, not all of them. That gives us a couple of things that I really have appreciated. One is, as has been pointed out, and one of the speakers did too, it gives us the ability to benchmark against other cities, which is not a perfect measure, but it's an indication. The other is, since we've kept the same baseline for so many years on baseline questions, is that we've been able to watch trends. And there are distinct trends over time in people's response to these. And the combination of being able to look at those trends in our city relative to other cities has been, I found that to be enlightening. So I'm glad we do that. The other thing that we have done in the last few years is to have a small number of custom questions. And I see a lot of value in that as well. Again, if we are looking to understand things, we kind of have two choices. We either add custom questions to the National Citizen Survey, or we do a custom survey of our own. But those tend to be telephone surveys or online surveys, and I'm not sure, although I'd like to know, I'm not sure of the statistical flatness of those other things. And also they're quite expensive, so we don't do very many of them. So I like the combination of mostly benchmark with some question format. I've also liked that we did it every year. I know that costs money, but we do have a need for information and taking the pulse of the community on a statistical basis, as opposed to the other ways we do it, which is, typically hold outreach meetings and so forth, and neighborhood meetings and so forth. That's one way. But again, those are skewed as well. And so having this available on an annual basis is something that I personally have appreciated. And then finally, in terms of the data, one of the things that I have liked, although I'm not sure everybody's taken advantage of, was there was a way to get the raw data, okay, the pivot tables and spreadsheet formats and so forth, so that the people who are, their own data heads, which, I may be guilty of being, had access to the raw data to do their own analyses and their own investigation and their own crosstabs and correlations, such as the speaker, Ms. Spencer, suggested. That's trivial if you have access to the raw data and you know a little bit about statistics. So those are the things that I have liked about it. And I regret that we didn't have it last year, but I understand why. I hope we can forge a path forward that will retain some of those things. Again, I like the statistical flatness of it. I like the fact that we can get it done at a reasonable periodicity, as more than every 5 years or 2 years and so forth. And I like the ability to, both for the standard questions, which allows us to benchmark and look at trends, and the custom questions, at least a few, which allows us to dive down on specific things that are topical for that year. And with that, I'll shut up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Filsath. Councilmember Koo, would you like to speak to this item?
You know, I actually, thank you so much, Chair. I agree with most of what Councilmember Filsath has said. The survey, having it done every year, has really been informative. It has helped to determine and to show where the city is doing things right and where there might be need for improvement. And I too am, well, I am disappointed that we didn't have it last year. And, you know, I don't have much to say except that I do believe that a lot of the questions that is there now, and also the choice questions that were put in, we should review those ones, but the ones that are generally there, we should leave them there. But the ones that are more custom, we can take a look at it and see if they're still relevant or not, but also add in some things that we might be facing at this time and make it more updated.
Great, thanks so much. I have a few questions. Actually, I'm going to start with you, Councilmember Filsath. What do you mean by statistical flatness? That's not a phrase I hear
yeah,
often.
sorry, not skewed, right? Represent. I think it's the thing that we have statistically valid,
yeah, okay.
relative to the population of Palo Alto.
Okay.
As opposed to.
Okay, I was like, what does statistical flatness mean? And then the raw data, when that was available before, was that available to everyone in the public or just available to council members?
You know, I wish I knew. I got it by asking Harriet.
Oh. I'm guessing available to council members who know how to use pivot tables.
You know, that the only way I knew how to do it to get it was to send an email to Harriet, and I am embarrassed to say that I never pursued farther trying to get a more standardized process open to more people.
Okay, got it. Then I have some questions for staff. So Ms. Eisenhenny, how does staff use this report? I'm just going to say, if at all, because I don't think I've heard about it since our retreat a year ago.
Right. So we use it actually in the benchmarking and in our performance measures as part of the annual budget. So in places where departments have used it, they include the trend data. It's also has been used in the past as part of the, so the part of the performance reporting. In my own experience, we have used it when there have been areas that by comparison we were not doing well compared to other communities. It was a point of discussion, but I do have to say it's not something we use even monthly, or it's used a couple times a year. And that doesn't mean that it's not valuable. It just means it's not something we're also in the habit of using. And so I think many departments use less, thinking about being a researcher, less valid, statistically valid surveys or satisfaction types of reporting, whether it's handing out an evaluation form after a program, or looking at more like the use data rather than thinking about it as something that would come out of this report. So that's a long answer to say we don't use it probably as much as we could. And,
Yeah.
you know, it depends on the department.
Okay, and was there any reason given by the company, or did we have any reason to know why the response rate dropped so precipitously in 2018? Went down to 21%.
So I think that the only explanation for that was the change in the number of available surveys. But because in 2018, there were 4,500 surveys mailed out and there were 889 responses received. So a 21% response rate. However, if you look at 2003 to 2009 or 2006, sorry, there were only 1,200 mailed out and 500 received. So it was a 51% response rate. It was fewer surveys that were mailed out in those earlier periods. So
Okay.
you could have less responses and the percentage rate would still be higher.
Yeah, it seems like a big drop. And when I counted it up, it's an awful lot of questions. Some of the questions have 37 sections, one has 36. So when I took a look at all of this and I thought about spending $27,000, I thought this might be a really good time. Thank you to Monique for suggesting that we take a look at it. Okay, so I wonder, Ms. Henny, if you can tell us what our options are. So right now we do sort of like the maximum length in paper. What are our other options, and what might that look like in terms of costs and potential formats?
Right. So the company has some other options. They have a and I don't know if you went to the link in the report, but all of that is available there on their website. So you can do a basic survey with just a couple of custom questions, and that is the most basic survey, but it would still have a fair number of questions and would still take about a 20-minute time period, you know, estimated 20 minutes to complete. It can be in paper, and those mailed surveys with the invitations just to the basic 2,700 households, that could that's a you know, that's a basic rate. If we wanted to shorten the survey, and we could certainly shorten it, they would work with us to curate the number of questions. That would be considered a custom survey also, and would require additional costs. If the additional costs come in where we have 5,000 surveys mailed out instead of 2,700, more custom questions rather than fewer. But even if, as we talked with the company, we realized that even if we reduce the number of questions we would be asking, that would still incur a cost. The least expensive option is an online subscription for completing it online without any pre-selection or survey invitation. Essentially, we would make the survey available online. We would let the community know, just as we do with current surveys, and when we use SurveyMonkey or other companies to solicit feedback on particular topics, it would be that kind of a process, and that's the least expensive option out there. There is a hybrid option where we again can do levels of customization using the benchmark survey, where it's pre-selected. Some people would receive a paper survey and others would receive a unique link or a unique identifier to allow them to take the survey online. It might be a good option to try to see, are we really receiving the highest possible rate of return on the paper survey versus online? And it would also preserve the statistical flatness, as Eric described it, because it would be working with the company. They would be doing the outreach. They would be finding the addresses and soliciting the survey. So there's paper only, a hybrid, and online only.
All right, and all of those could be done with a statistical sample, right?
They could all be done with a statistical sample, yes, and with online reporting for the benchmarks and availability of data, yes.
So it seems to me we might have an opportunity to shorten it, and I have to believe that if we shorten it, people are going to be more likely to fill it out. Is that something that you tested with the company?
Yes, we did ask about the length of the survey. Certainly, the response was that it would be likely that we would get a better response if it were shortened, and that the it would need to be we would need to really focus on only the most important topics it needed, hot topics, performance measures. It would be again a custom survey. The cost might be less and the response rate would be higher. The only drawback to that might be with the benchmarking that is available, because we may not be asking questions that other communities are asking, and if that's of value or important this year, then that's likely to be something we wouldn't be able to do. It would just be what the responses were this year.
How do we know which of those questions there are benchmarks for? Or is there a benchmark for all of the questions? There
Yes,
it is. Okay. So any of the questions that we keep, we'll be able to benchmark. It's just whether or not there's a custom one.
Right.
Okay. All right. So thank you for that. Let me try something out on my colleagues just as I think about our opportunities and potential next steps. I don't know how much time you guys have spent like taking surveys, designing surveys, interpreting survey results. We've all got, different levels of expertise in our professional and personal lives, but fundamentally, I think this is a really long survey and we're asking a lot of questions that I certainly haven't seen staff use, and I haven't seen my colleagues talk about many of the super detailed ones. So I would love for us to consider shortening it so we can increase the response rate. I think the idea of splitting it so half the people get paper and half get online will help us evaluate in future years what's the best method. It's a little bit of a hybrid, maybe a bridge to our virtual world. And then the third part would be to think about how, which questions to retain, which questions to add. And we could do that a couple ways. One way is we could staff could ask council members to send directly to, for example, Monique, but not sharing with the rest of us, here are my top 10 questions, or, whichever number we think is appropriate. Here are the sections I'm most interested in. Another option would be for us as a committee to appoint an ad hoc. It'd have to be one person because we're in our new world, to work directly with Monique to make this survey relevant. I'd really like us to spend less money and get more useful information. And I think we can do that while preserving the things that you've indicated are important to both of you. I'm not quite sure what those are because I don't hear them referenced very often, but interested in learning more about that. So those are my thoughts, and why don't we do another round and open to thoughts and suggestions about how to move forward. Councilmember Filseth.
So just briefly, as I think about this, I think it could be shorter as well, and I think that of the standard questions they ask, I think we could cut some of those. I think we could reduce that by a quarter or a third pretty easily. Many of them come back, and there's sort of not a lot of it's sort of motherhood and apple pie kind of stuff that you don't really need to take a survey for it and say, well, okay, yeah, that makes sense. It's sort of not anything. It doesn't add a lot of new information. So I think it would make sense to do that. I would hope that I would hope that doing a subset of the standard questions would not cost more, at least, right? Because of the customization. And I completely agree that if it were shorter, you have a good chance of getting a higher response rate. The number of custom questions in the past, as I've sort of seen this, it's been pretty small. It's like a half dozen or something like that, as opposed to 20. And I think what sort of happened in the past is Harriet sent out a couple emails to council members saying, "You guys got anything you want to ask?" and so forth. And and only a couple of us ever responded, and so we got our questions. Right? And so I think I'm not sure that's the optimal way to do it, right? But I think to the extent we ask custom questions, we're probably talking about a half dozen or something like that, as opposed to 20, for example. So that'd be my 2 bits. The A/B test of paper versus online, that's a sensible idea. I'd like to know the answer to that too. My intuition is that if you do it all online, you will get a distribution that's not necessarily representative of the whole city, but doing an A/B test like that would be a good test of that. So.
If I can jump in there, I did ask that question, are you to the survey representative asking
Oh, what'd they say? Yeah.
And they do weight the answers to, adjust for overrepresentation and that distribution. So.
Well, of course, but then what
Correct.
you weight, okay.
That's correct.
You make it skews it too, right? You say, well, are we going to weight by age or by location, or what answer do you want anyway?
So the other thing that they conveyed to me was that the expectation or their experience has been that online, the 35 to 55 age group, that range will be much higher than it's been in paper. The older above that will be much higher on paper. And they're really struggling with the 18 to 35 group, and they're working on she said
it's
that
not
one
on Snapchat.
Sure.
No,
Shorter
right.
survey, yeah, right, exactly.
Right, so shorter may help with some of that.
You need a contest or something like that for.
Thank you. Councilmember Koo, any thoughts on how to move forward?
I guess, with the ad hoc committee, it can work. I think, and then working with Monique. But I think I agree, cutting down on the questions might and get people to do the survey and take it. I guess my concern with whether it's mail or hybrid or online is with the online, how do we have certainty, you know, as Councilmember Philsef said, that, you know, the answers are going to be coming from a unique individual rather than somebody filling out multiple times. And then I think that, you know, the benchmarking with questions that other cities are doing is important, because if we're going on a regional effort, we want to know where and what our regional legislation or regulations that works or not work, and then why is it working in one city and not working in another. But it kind of helps take a look at that. Yeah, so at this point, that's all I can think about. It's a big survey, and I think that I would have to really look at the questions to have better ideas, each and every one of them, to see, you know, what are some that are not needed and what are some that could potentially be a duplication in some ways, you know, right.
Can I respond about the
Please.
online surveys? My understanding is that those taking the online survey will receive a unique URL that they can only use once. Now, whether they hand it to their neighbor or, you know, we wouldn't know that. Same for the paper. If they handed it to somebody else, we wouldn't have known that either. But you know, there are instructions that have always been included that are very clear about, you know, we're asking you to do this, you know, that kind of thing, the person to whom it's addressed. But you could hand it to your spouse, your partner, your kid, you know. So for that, that's about the best we can hope for.
May I ask a question, Chair? So, Monique, does that mean that when you say there's a unique URL and, you know, whoever it is that gets that or is named for that survey and they hand it to someone else, it's still one person who's taking it, right? Not multiple people, right?
Yes, that is my understanding of how that works.
And so even on the online, it would be one person who's doing it.
Correct.
Similar to the mail-in paper one, only one person can do it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
what I believe. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thanks for those thoughts and that clarification. Now, since we're talking about hybrids, I wonder actually if we could do a hybrid, if we could both have Ms. Susan Henney send a note to all the council saying, hey, we're going to look through this, and, you know, by whatever is appropriate deadline, please provide, you know, the 20 questions you really want in here, or the 20 questions you think we could really get rid of, or however she chooses to structure that. So each of us, I know some of our colleagues feel very strongly about this particular survey. So I think we could do that, and then potentially also we could have one of us partner with Ms. Susan Henney just as we get further along. I think it's actually great to have the city manager's office pick this up, because one of the things that's definitely missing in here are questions about, for example, council priorities. There's some things that are really important to us as a council that there are zero questions on. Like sustainability, there's barely anything in there on climate change, things like that. So I guess I will just go ahead and propose that, or why don't I wait? Councilmember Philseth, you're leaning forward. Thoughts on a hybrid?
I'm all ears.
Okay. Great. Well, since Ms. Susan Henney and I had a chance to think about this, why don't I just try a motion and we'll see how that goes. I move that we ask the Assistant City Manager to communicate with each of the council members and identify questions that are important to them to retain in this survey, and any areas that they think are less relevant, and then identify any questions they would like to add. I also move that we do a hybrid model, which is both, we'll have both a paper component and then the option not the option, and then an online component that will be driven by a piece of paper and will be unique. And finally, I move that the chair appoint one of us to be an ad hoc to coordinate with Ms. Susan Henney, just to make sure that we have every question answered.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Filsath. Did you want to speak to it, Councilmember Filsath, or any amendments you'd suggest?
Delighted to have it move forward.
Okay. And Councilmember Koo, do you have thoughts you'd like to share?
Just a question on the hybrid method. Did you have a proposal of how many is going to go out? Or is that left kind of open at this time?
That is a good question. Ms. Susan Henney, can you remind me? I think we are able to send more, right? If we do hybrid?
Well, we have always been able to send more. So in the most recent survey, we sent out 4,500 surveys that were mailed out. Previous to that, it had been 3,000 and then 1,200. So the initial recommendation from the vendor is 2,700 households, but we are certainly able to change that. So.
Okay, so perhaps then to answer Councilmember Koo's question, we will work within our budget and figure out what's the maximum number we can send within our budget. How does that sound?
That sounds good within our budget, right?
Yeah, and thank you to the clerk. Could I just point out where it says paper and electron, we'll say electronic format, as the cursor magically flies around.
Oops. And you wanted to, what was the last part of the motion you wanted to incorporate, Chair Cormack?
That we, so where it has used a hybrid option of paper and electronic format, comma, sending as many as possible within our budget. Does that capture it, Councilmember Koo?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Great, and all right, any other questions or comments before we vote on that?
I'm wondering if you have a time frame for this.
Yes, tell us what the time frame is, because I know we're on a deadline.
So this committee actually has a role in the process setting for the council priorities discussion. So usually around November, December-ish, we have a discussion about that, whether there's any input. We will continue to use the OpenGov platform as a way to collect information specifically on that question of council priorities. So let's see, we're at August, September.
So would we want the results by the end of October?
That would be ideal.
Great, let's go with that.
Let's go with that. Sorry, I know I had to count back out loud, and I appreciate your patience, thanks.
No worries. Finalize the results, yeah, by the end of October. Great. Which I think is more rapid than we got it last time. I've only gotten it the one time, but.
It is. I will say though, that to Eric's point, Councilmember Filsath's point, is that we will not have the auditor's office working with the data as much. So we will be relying on NRC to prepare much of the reporting. And of course, there are options where they can actually review the data with the council. You know, there are options for that kind of work. So, and now that many councils are in a virtual format, that may be a less expensive option than it's been in the past, and might be worthwhile. So, I'll investigate that as well.
Okay, within our budget.
Within our budget, yes.
Question?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you. Would we still be able to get would some of the council members, such as council members Philseth, still be able to request for the raw data?
I believe that will be something, we did talk about that, and there was the option for some tabulated data as well from NRC, so that should be possible.
And he's not the only one who's going to want it.
No, and in the interest of transparency, I think it would be interesting to make available through either the open data platform or whatever works. So
Absolutely.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. All right. Anything else to make this better? No, we're okay. Then we're ready to vote. Could I ask the clerk please to call the vote?
Chair Cormack,
Yes.
Councilmember Philseth,
Yes.
Councilmember Ku,
Yes.
three yes.
3 yes. Excellent. Passes unanimously. And then I'll just say if either of you is interested in being the ad hoc committee, since only one of us can be it, please just let me know in the next day or so, and then I'll go ahead and choose someone. Okay.
Okay.
And happy to serve myself if necessary, but happy to have one of you participate if you're interested. Okay, that concludes action item 1. And now we move on to future meetings and agendas. And I wanted to take a moment to go through the topics that Councilmember Ku had mentioned last time. And these are the notes that I have. So on renter protection, the staff assisted me in going back and looking at this. I think this was superseded by the state. Was there something else, Councilmember Ku, that you were thinking of that was not addressed in the state legislation?
Can I get back to you on that?
Sure.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Sure. And then you had mentioned safe parking, and that'll be coming to council as an action item in September. And then with work from home for our own departments, this is more the category of employee and city policies as part of human relations. So if you were thinking about this with respect to carbon footprint, then it might be in the council sustainability. It seems more like an operational thing for the employees, but is there something more there that I perhaps didn't understand?
Well, I was actually hoping that we could come up with some policy to recommend to council with regards to telecommuting and coming up with a format, especially now that we have some experience with it. You know, we can start with city employees first and kind of set that in place, and then in time perhaps expand it so that as the companies come back, you know, that might be something that we might want to explore to keep the carbon footprint down and greenhouse gases down as well. So
so I think that what I'll just, yeah, okay, but it sounds like you mean for our own employees.
Just to start off, right.
Okay. Maybe I'll just encourage you to just take that up with the city manager and figure out the best way to have that go forward. Happy to have that come here, but that feels to me like a good discussion for you to have with him, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, great. And then the last one was airplane noise and emissions. And it doesn't appear that that has ever come before policy and services. So I'm wondering if maybe in your role, with the roundtable, you could bring that up under council member comments and questions, and we could all figure out together with the city manager how to have an update on that.
We had, you know, I forget which year, but it's either 2 or 3 years ago that it had come to policy and services, and I would have to go back and look at what it was that came to policy and services.
Okay. I don't know that staff was able to find it, so that would be really helpful if you could find that, and then we'll figure out where to pick it up from. Great. Okay. Are there other topics for future meetings and agendas that my colleagues would like to suggest?
Well, sort of distant early warning here is, it's probably some months away, but my expectation is that the city's going to have an auditor on board somewhere late this month, and at that point, what the audit plan looks like for next year and risk assessments and so forth is going to be a bunch of opportunity for the city to do work. And at the moment, that falls under the purview of the Policy and Services Committee. And so we ought to maybe be thinking about that. Again,
and I think
a couple of months out.
Thing that would be very helpful, and I don't know whether that's for Ms. Season-Henney or for our new city auditor when that firm is appointed, is to bring us a sort of comprehensive list of here are all the audits we've done in the past 10 years, just all in one place. So we have a good sense of where we've been, and that will help us figure out where we want to go forward, in addition to the comprehensive risk assessment.
Pardon me, Chair. It looks
Yes,
like there is a speaker. And,
I don't recall on whether or not we take, we're supposed to, but I know I did last time. So let's go ahead and take oral public comment on future meetings and agendas.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it's Cheryl Spencer wanting to speak on future meetings and agendas. Cheryl, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, I have.
Okay.
You can hear me? Yes.
Yep.
Yes, so I didn't know this would be coming up, but of course, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women ordinance, we are still waiting to see if the staff have done any work on that, which has been on your plate since October 2018. So I represent a coalition of groups who are interested in moving that forward. I know you have a work study event on the 24th of August that Councillor Cormack has informed me about. But nevertheless, I think the CEDAW ordinance still sits in your pile of things to do. We would very much like to see it appear on an agenda. Having pressed on the responsible staff for actually doing something about it. My understanding is it's sitting in staff's bailiwick at the moment. So that's what I would like to suggest, that you give them some deadline and you put it on a meeting agenda of your own, so that they're obliged to do something about it. And we will be present at the 24th of August event. I'd like to know what time it will be. I don't see it on the agenda yet of the City Council. I presume it'll go up there at some point, so that more of us will be able to be present to help along with that discussion of discrimination based on sex that may be going on in the city. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Spencer. And she's referring to an email I sent indicating that the ad hoc reports on the 24th, and that has not been published yet. Usually we start at 5. We're supposed to start at 7, but often maybe we start at 6. You'll have to wait. It's usually published 11 days beforehand. So that would be on the 13th, which would be this Thursday. But the diversity, equity, and inclusion ad hoc will be addressing things broadly, not just with respect to race. So I had suggested that might be a good time. All right, thank you so much. And are there any other public comments on this topic?
Hi, Chair. No, there are no more public speakers raising their hands.
Thank you to the clerk. And Councilmember Philseth, any other suggestions for us to be looking at going forward? Great. And Councilmember Koo, are there any additional ones you'd like to add?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. And Ms. Season-Henney, is there anything else we should do before we adjourn?
No, thank you all very much.
All right, then we're adjourned. Thanks and have a nice evening.
Good night.
Thanks, folks.